We have so little time, so we're going to dive right into it. And I know that this conference is about the children and media safety, but you can't have that conversation without talking about the broader media ecosystem in which all of that exists and the institutions that have been able to create that sort of content. So, on that note, we can't start this conversation without talking about your successor at the FCC. The media environment today is one of not just consolidation and politicization, but there have been real threats against the media. And in your time, I believe, toward the end of your tenure at the FCC, you rejected complaints against the major broadcast networks. Your successor, Brendan Carr, opened them back up, and since then he has been aggressive, to say the least, in terms of his approach to the broadcast networks. What do you make of that? What do you make of the state of the FCC now? Did you anticipate that when you left? Did you know he was going to be like that?
Well, thank you for starting things off nice and light there, Dylan. We have on our hands a serious threat to the First Amendment.
Yeah.
And even democracy itself. But let me just roll back for a second and tell you how we got here. It was the start of 2025. I am closing out my tenure as the chair of the Federal Communications Commission. We've done a lot of great things on closing the digital divide and making sure Wi-Fi is available in more places. And I have this premonition, this foreboding sense that what's coming next is going to be a real problem for the news media and free speech. So I look at what's on deck at the FCC, and we have 4 petitions challenging the coverage, content, and behavior of stations at ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox. They come from all quarters, from the right and the left, but what they have in common is they uniformly seek to use the government and the FCC to weaponize the First Amendment. So, in one fell swoop, in one of my last days in office, I got rid of them all. And I put out a statement and I said, we're doing this because I think something's coming. And we're doing this because 2 things are true. First, the FCC should not be the president's speech police. And second, the FCC should not be journalism's censor-in-chief. Now, I believe those things then, and I believe them now. It's not so clear with respect to my successor, but it is clear to me that history is not going to be kind to people who burn down the Constitution and dress it up as free speech.
I want to go one more beat on that before we turn to Gary. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I have you on stage.
Coming.
What am I going to do?
I saw that coming.
I wonder, what you say, history won't be kind to those who do that, but I wonder if you fear a long-term effect from the current FCC's actions, which is to say, presumably, ostensibly, hopefully, we will have a future administration. Do you anticipate that this sets a precedent for future administrations?
Well, of course I'm concerned. I think we're all concerned. But I'm also an optimist. When I see the pushback that this agency is getting and its behavior is getting right now, I think people understand the stakes. And that leaves me with hope, and that's why I'm comfortable saying history won't be kind.
Yeah. All right, so Gary, let's turn to you. You served at the head of 2 major flagship public media institutions, both NPR and Sesame Workshop. How do you feel about the politicization of the media, particularly as you think, and you're also at National Geographic, which created a lot of great educational programming. How do you think about the influence that our politics today is having on the ability of those institutions to remain sort of the center for great educational content?
Well, first of all, Dylan, I find it a little bit ironic, and Jessica, I go back further in FCC world perhaps than you do, back to the 1980s when one of your predecessors, Mark Fowler, removed all the regulations around equal time and the fairness doctrine, which we had to uphold actually when I was at WNET in New York, because he called television, quote unquote, a toaster with pictures. And that goes down in FCC lore as a moment. So now we're back to regulating the broadcast networks. It's just a bit of irony that some of us have to look back upon. I think, Dylan, look, at the end of the day, these organizations that I've been involved with, and there's many others in this room, are purpose-driven. They're really about education. So everything that I was involved in, whether it was Sesame Workshop trying to educate preschoolers, NPR trying to educate and inform a greater public about global affairs or our country, or National Geographic trying to get people to care for and about the planet, these are all born out of a mission, and that mission doesn't go away. These are truths that continue to go on. As we've heard all day today, the needs of kids are foremost and most relevant to the audience here, and the need for positive media that actually matches up to child development needs as a partner to parents and grandparents is something that doesn't go away. So there have always been pot shots taken, even at Sesame Street. We had an HIV positive Muppet character in South Africa, and I got accused of teaching sex education to 3-year-olds. That's not what there's always people who want to attack. The show was banned in the state of Mississippi the first year because it showed a cast that was diverse living together in harmony on a street called Sesame. So it's not that these things have never existed before, it's just they're amped up more. But I think the needs are still there, the truths are, as to borrow a phrase, self-evident, and we need to continue to go forward.
These things do come in waves, but I do wonder in terms of the strength of those institutions, efforts to defund PBS and NPR. You're also just in a media environment where trust in legacy media, traditional media, is, I would say, at an all-time low. Whether you're looking at Pew, whether you're looking at Gallup, how do you bounce back? A question for both of you. How do you bounce back from that?
If I could just quickly, I'll jump in. We used to say at National Geographic, we need to push relevance over reverence, and I think that's really true. So it's the greater challenge to me, at least in the organizations I've been involved with, is less the politicization, but it's more about fighting irrelevance in a world where there is infinite content, and we are competing against every piece of content ever invented, from Gone with the Wind to a cat video every single day, and an infinite stream of content. So how do we get National Geographic on social media, or the lessons of Sesame Workshop moving forward, or NPR fighting the same battles that every other news organization from a business model point of view? That is, to me, the greater challenge, to make sure that those who believe in education and information for a broader public interest continues to thrive.
I think it's pretty basic. We need news to make decisions about our lives, our communities, and our country. It's the only private sector activity called out in the Constitution. It really matters. And like you say, trust in news is in serious decline. I think it's important to also note what's in serious decline is the economic model that sustained journalism for about a century. When it comes to advertising, analog dollars became digital dimes, which then became digital pennies, and now the penny's even going away. And those are real problems for media going forward. But I think the place to really lean into is local media, because when you look at the kind of data you just suggested, what you find over and over again throughout the country is that more people trust local media than national media. They trust local media because it gives them those facts they need to make decisions about their lives and their community, and because they think it's a lot less agenda-driven. So I think we need policies, tax policies on subscription, on hiring, and policies that help support local scale ad tech to help sustain media, and we should start with local.
On that point, do you worry about the health of local news? Tomorrow we're going to have the Attorneys General of California and New Mexico on, and they've obviously spoken out against the Nexstar acquisition of Tegna. Do you worry about consolidation in local news affecting its value to civic society?
The quick answer is yes.
Yeah. I want to pivot now, Jessica, to talking about some of the work that you're doing at MIT. How do you think about fostering a better atmosphere, a better media atmosphere, and how do you think about what work you can do in the academic sector to sort of help these issues?
You know, some of it is about the research we do on multisensory intelligence and wireless sensors, but I actually think what's more important are the people in this room. I suspect we have a lot of shared values, like we care about accuracy, transparency, and accountability, and we want to see it in our media environment. So the advice I'd have right now is to really lean into technology and the changes that we see. Don't just be a critic, be a creator. So figure out what's happening in influencer culture. Understand how to work foundation models with AI, and play around with what's emerging on the agentic web. Because when you do that, your work, your advocacy, your commentary is going to help all of us produce a better media environment. And so I don't want there to be digital haves and have-nots, and I don't want there to be a small realm of technologists who understand these things. I want them broadly understood. And I think your power as advocates for kids, for our future and technology, really grows exponentially the more familiar you get with what's coming down the road.
I think that gets to the issue of quality control. And Gary, I want to ask you about this. When I was a kid growing up, and you basically had, whether it was Sesame, PBS, right? When I was a kid in the car listening to my parents, it was NPR. You take the media ecosystem, and there are institutions where the value proposition is trust, integrity, accuracy. It was never perfect, but that was the North Star. In a new environment, whether you're talking about news or children's programming, you were talking about YouTube, you were talking about AI-generated content increasingly. How do you feel about maintaining quality control in that environment?
Well, I think you put your finger on it, Dylan. It's the Wild West. Say what you want, when most of us in this room were growing up with either the broadcast networks or linear cable networks like Nickelodeon and Disney and even Cartoon Network, PBS Kids, there were people in charge of these who were truly dedicated to kids, at least in the best interests of kids, right, which they got most of the time right. Today, we don't see that. We have basically an endless stream of content that is, some of which is amazingly wonderful in the user-generated universe on YouTube, and some of it is not wonderful at all and is in fact dangerous, that our kids are exposed to all kinds of things that they should never be exposed to because they don't have the ability from a development point of view to process a lot of these influences about violent content, et cetera. So to me, we've been thinking a lot about this. There's almost a need for a new Sesame Street moment in 2026. Joan Gans Cooney, who started Sesame Street, went out in 1968 with funding from Carnegie to go out and basically do a listening tour of how do you take child development needs and attach them to television, which Chairman Newt Minow had called the vast wasteland. And basically everything was about selling to kids like me sugar-sweetened cereal and candy. And why don't we take the lessons from that and sell letters and numbers, which is why it's brought to you by A and the number 5. If you go forward today, there's that moment again. The child development needs are still there. How can we now figure out a way to incentivize user-generated content and the creative community that exists, which is robust and global, into a place where they can address and match those to the child development needs that we've been hearing about all morning. That does not exist. There's no roadmap. So it's all kind of made up and thrown against the wall, good, bad, indifferent, and otherwise safe and dangerous. It's time that some of us in this room and other places create this roadmap and work with funders and foundations and others who care about this.
You know, that report from Joan Gans-Cooney is amazing if you go back and read it, because she speaks about how the kids were just drawn to the television screen. Once they started watching, they couldn't stop. What she was describing to me was exactly what I saw with my own kids with phones. So the phenomenon is not actually new. And what you realize in history, we had the audacity to come up with something like Sesame Street. Make it easy for parents to figure out how to get content that had quality and that they could feel trustworthy, you know, that they were putting their kids in front of it and that they would learn something. That being drawn to these electronic screens means you can also enrich and educate and not just entertain. And I feel like when you look at what she produced, it feels so current that the kind of moment you're describing, Gary, like we're ripe for it happening again, even if the screens are smaller.
It's a great point, and you didn't mean to, but you've allowed me to backdoor into another FCC Brendan Carter question, which is, I know, I'm sorry. I try to find solace in the fact that the areas where the FCC and Chairman Carr are able to exercise pressure on media is actually quite limited in scope, because they are able to make threats about broadcast licenses, and they're able, therefore, to go after broadcast networks. But as we are discussing up here on stage, the media environment, whether you're talking about general entertainment or news or children's programming, educational programming, is vast and fragmented and is not the sole province of broadcast television and has not been for a long time. Does that give you solace? And do you feel like there might be other ways or other levers that the government needs in order to police what's going on here? Or do you think it's better that they don't?
All right, so technology, politics, and the First Amendment in the last 2 minutes.
We actually have 1:55.
It's so radically different now. You know, I mean, we're not watching on the television screen. We're watching what we want, when we want it, on any piece of glass handy. That's the baseline for everyone today. Our policy is not organized around that, as you point out. It is focused largely on the use of radio frequency, which is used for broadcast television licenses. But those licenses have played an important role in helping produce the news that we all rely on. So taking actions that threaten them are still consequential, because they can chill the activities of those that produce content and news coverage right now. And that's dangerous, and it's important that people speak up and speak out against that.
Here's what I actually do want to do with the last minute. I want to...
Never should have given you...
No,
back.
you're going to like this one. Brent, your successor is very loud about what he's doing. From my perspective, has more bark than bite. You just got to work, and you did things that I think the public does not understand. The general public doesn't understand perhaps as much as they understand what your successor has done. Can you talk quickly, just in the last minute, about what some of those moves that you made, what you're most proud of during your time at the FCC?
We did amazing work to help close the digital divide. When I came to the FCC, it was COVID. Remember those days? We had kids sitting in parking lots with laptops perched on their knees just to try to go to online class. I started the Affordable Connectivity Program, the largest broadband affordability program in our nation's history. We got 23 million low-income households online, many of them with children. We got another 12 million students online. We mapped where broadband is and is not down to the household level, so that we could start figuring out where to send federal money to close the divide. And frankly, you don't hear about it anything like you did before, because we hunkered down and did a lot of work, and I'm really proud of that.
As you should be. Thank you both for taking the time doing this. Thank you, Common Sense, and thank you all. Hope that was enjoyable.
Hey, Dylan, stay up here for 1 sec. Stay up here for 1 sec. I just want to say a couple of things, and then we're going to introduce the last couple of sessions. First of all, that was an incredibly interesting panel. They have all been incredibly interesting, but the fact that you all were able to bring up something that really is rooted in the founding of Common Sense Media, obviously I know Jessica and Gary, and to some extent Dylan very well. But the reason I wanted to comment on this for the audience is I think that we've talked about an incredibly important series of stuff today, and we're about to hear another panel that's going to build on this. But this is something, and I was glad you said this, Jessica and Gary, too. This is a fundamental challenge to stuff that, like Gary, look at his beard. He's been working on this for a few years, guys. I mean, Jessica's very young, the youngest chair ever in the history of the FCC. But these are really fundamental challenges to the state of kids and education in America, and quite frankly, globally. And listening to the panel, I hope you all, because now we're going to talk about growing up in the digital age and the AI age, but they're all related. That was what was so interesting about this discussion. But it's also something where one of the things that we at Common Sense hope you will take from this extraordinary couple of days is that we have to do something about this. This is a fundamental change after many, many decades of it never being like this. And it's being done by a handful of people, many of whom are completely irresponsible to the traditions of education, media, children, and other things. And listening to that panel, and they were very restrained, in my opinion, about what they said, is, to me, one of the great challenges and opportunities of why we're all here today. So I just wanted to thank Gary and Jessica and Dylan for having that session. We're going to get into some of this more tomorrow. But now I guess I can say thank you, and you guys can leave the stage to these guys. But this is a really, really big deal. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Jessica.